Good afternoon. I'll call to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee. I'm Cam Gordon. I'm chair of the committee, and I'm joined by Councilmembers Goodman, Ellison, and Schrader. We're a quorum of the committee, and we can conduct our business. There's just two items before us today. The first is a consent item, and the second is a discussion item. So I'll move the consent item first, and if anybody wants to discuss it on the committee, we can do that. The consent item is the passage of a resolution authorizing submission of the 2018 Hennepin County Transit-Oriented Development Grant applications to Hennepin County Transit-Oriented Development Program. Anybody wants to discuss that? Seeing none then, and no one, I will then move approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And then we can move on to our discussion item today. This is a affordable 4D pilot initiative program, and I believe we're going to get a staff report from Ms. Robards. Are we ready? Okay, great. Welcome. And welcome, Mayor Fry. Did you want to speak before the presentation, or?
If it's all right, I can speak immediately after the presentation,
That's
Mr.
fine.
Chair. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members of the committee. I'm Esther Robards, Senior Project Coordinator in the Multifamily Department. This is a request to establish the 4D Pilot Initiative, which is an initiative we were asked to look into back in 2017 by Chair Goodman of CDRS. We're here to adopt a form participation agreement and declaration of restrictive covenants and delegate authority to authorize and execute the participation agreements to the city's Director of Housing Policy and Development. We do have one minor change to the program documentation, which has been distributed to you based on recent feedback that we've gotten. I'll go through the details of the change as I present the program. Naturally occurring affordable housing generally refers to unsubsidized multifamily rental housing projects that have at least 20% of the units with rents affordable to households with incomes at or below 60% of the area median income. Rents in these NOAA units tend to average between $600 and $1,200 a month. The city of Minneapolis accounts for approximately 23% of the naturally occurring affordable housing units in the 7-county metropolitan area, or about 38,000 units. Preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing has become a critical issue given the growing shortage of affordable housing in the metro area. With metro area rental vacancy rates at about 2.7%, naturally occurring affordable housing properties have become progressively attractive to local and national speculators intent on maximizing cash flow through increasingly higher rents. In general, naturally occurring affordable housing properties tend to be Class C properties, which is a designation in the commercial real estate community. Class C properties are typically older, offer no amenities, and are not produced in the marketplace. Once a Class C property is improved to a Class B or torn down, it's lost forever. A report from the Minnesota Housing Partnership using CoStar data shows that the average rent in Class C buildings is 49% below the average rent for Class B buildings. In other words, there is strong pressure to improve the finishes and amenities in these buildings and charge Class B rents, which are unaffordable to families whose incomes are at or below 60% AMI. In Minneapolis, approximately 53% of residents live in rental housing, and about half of them are considered to be rent burdened or cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. Despite the tens of millions of dollars invested in affordable housing production and preservation in the subsidized market, today there are about 10,000 fewer rental housing units affordable to households with incomes at or below 50% of the area median income compared to 2000. This is largely a result of naturally occurring affordable housing properties transitioning to higher rent properties. Currently, subsidized affordable housing can apply to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for low-income rent classification status, LIRC, otherwise known as 4D status. This tax classification results in a 40% reduction in property taxes on restricted units. To qualify for the preferred tax status, the property must be subject to a recorded document due to financial assistance from a unit of federal, state, or local government that restricts at least 20% of the units to be affordable and occupied by households at or below 60% of the AMI. Staff proposes the establishment of a pilot initiative that utilizes the state LERC status to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing properties with 10 units or more. Owners of qualified properties who participate in the 4D pilot initiative will agree to restrict a portion of their units at 60% AMI for 10 years, subject to a reduction after 5 years as described in the attached initiative guidelines, in exchange for a payment of the first year's LERC application fee, the declaration filing fee, the property tax reduction, and the option to participate in rebate and city energy efficiency subsidy programs. So here I'd like to point out the change we made. We made the change of requiring the energy audits to encouraging the energy audits because staff was not able to finalize the details of the subsidy package for the energy efficiency work due to an extremely tight time frame of the 4D application turnaround. We did not want to force potential participants to commit to something that wasn't clearly defined. However, we do believe this type of work can be beneficial to both owners and tenants, so we will strongly encourage and work with owners who are interested in pursuing energy efficiency work. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. well, first of all, I want to thank Councilmember Goodman for all of her leadership on this issue. And I just had a couple questions about specific to the background of the program at the state. Could you just give us a little more detail on the cycle that you just described and the opportunity to use this first year as a, as a kind of like our pilot year and learning some of the things that you just talked about around energy efficiency or maybe other details, and then going forward, what would this look like given the state's program and timeline and applications and all of that?
I'd like to call up my manager, Angie Skildum, for that.
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Bender, Council President Bender, pardon me. Yes, so this LERC 4D classification is available to existing renters, and the State Housing Finance Agency has a deadline of March 31st every year for them to get their applications in. Because we've been still working on this program, we weren't able to meet that deadline this year. There's a statutory deadline. It's not a statutory deadline, but there's a deadline of June 1st to get the classifications to the auditor's office. And so we're really trying to work to get some pilot members into this June 1st cycle for a tax benefit in 2019. Starting next year, we'll have the ability to test the results of this pilot period. We've got to thank our friends at Minnesota Housing for working with us to take a few applications here on a late cycle so that we can test the pilot for 2019. And then starting next year, we would just use the regular March 31st deadline, and then we wouldn't be bound by restricting the number of units necessarily or the number of applications necessarily that the city could submit.
If I may, then my next question was, what is the future potential of us to apply this more broadly? Is there a limit to the number of buildings or units that could participate in this program in the future going forward?
Chair Gordon, Council President Bender, there is only such to the extent that the council would desire to set a limit to that participation. It would be only bound by the number of properties that are eligible under the statute, meaning that they'd have to have rents and income at or below 60% of AMI.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would have a comment about that, but I'll hold to see if Councilmember Goodman or others wanted to chime in before I do that.
Okay. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but I do want to make a couple of comments. Is this the time to do so?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start the comments.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank staff for bringing forward the pilot program. I had initially intended to bring this forward with advance notice because I felt like it was a good kind of give and take, carrot and stick as we move advance notice forward. But as it became obvious that Minnesota Housing had a deadline and our advance notice is not quite ready to go, although it's close. Councilmember Schrader and I are working on it together. Staff took the leap off and said, let's go ahead and try to do a pilot. And I very much appreciate that. I want to tell you all a story of why I think this is important. And I have a 7th Ward resident who is the 3rd generation owner of a 12-unit building in the Lowry Hill neighborhood. It was his grandfather's building. It was given to him by his father, and now he lives in the building, and he rents 11 other units. And he was telling me at an event I was at about his visit with the city assessor. And that the city assessor came to his building and said, how many units do you have? And he told them. And then he said, and what do you charge for the units? And his rents are very low. In fact, they would meet the rent requirement. And the assessor essentially said to him, well, you should raise the rents because the value of your building is based on what your highest and best use rent can be. So even though you're charging $600, you could charge $1,500, and I'm going to value your building as though you're charging $1,500, thus dramatically increasing his taxes, forcing him to potentially and likely increase his rent. And that got me thinking, we should probably do something about that. Is it possible to do something about that? And that is how I started pursuing this idea of seeing if it was possible to qualify NOAA owners for 4D tax exemptions just for the units that they're holding affordable at 60%. So not for the units that they're charging for market rate. And that's kind of how I got involved in the issue. This is one piece of a very large puzzle in the affordable housing continuum. It is not the be-all and end-all, but it is a recognition that NOAA owners are really important in the scheme of things, and that many of them voluntarily hold their rents down, and they don't need to. And so I think that this is a small step. I am hoping, as Councilmember Bender alluded to, that we can expand this broadly, but I'm hoping right now we can get 300 properties signed up. We have my constituent, we're in touch with him, and I believe that there is someone in Whittier that staff is also in touch with, and we'll be doing a press release later in the day to see if we can recruit others through associations and the general public to see if we can get up to the 300 that we would need for a pilot. I also very much appreciate the approach staff has taken with regard to the energy efficiency pieces of it. For me, I really feel it needs to be considered an incentive. If you do this, then you'll get that. Suggesting to a property owner that's never had to deal with the city before that we're going to come in and do an audit doesn't sound like the carrot that we're trying to provide, even though once explained, it could be seen that way. And so I do think that for right now in the pilot, this should be an option, and I appreciate the way that it's been approached. So with that, I'm happy to move approval, and I'm sure others want to speak as well. I thank staff for all of their hard work in dealing with me in dealing with this.
Thank you very much. Mayor Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a huge thank you to staff for pulling these 40 properties together in a very short time frame and getting them into Mary Tingerthal and others. I think that was really critical, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So thank you for working your tail off for a couple of weeks there. In the city of Minneapolis, we presently have 52% of the population is renters. About half of those renters are cost burdened. About 3/4 of low income renters are also cost burdened. So what that means is that many of these renters are paying more than 30% of their income on rents and utilities. And ultimately, this means that too many families and individuals lack stable housing. We know this very well, so I won't go into depth. But at the same time, I've been hearing from quite a few property owners who acknowledge what Councilmember Goodman just pointed out, which is that the maintenance costs and the prices are rising, and if they don't increase the rents to accommodate, then they will ultimately be losing money. And so this 4D pilot program really attacks that item head on. So I'm very pleased to see it moving forward. I want to especially thank Angie Skildum and Andrea Brennan from CPED, Luke Hollenkamp from Sustainability, Patrick Hanlon and Esther Robards, who have all put in a great deal of work to pull this together. I want to thank Peter Ebnett from my office and Councilmember Goodman. You've been carrying it for quite some time, and you've been advocating for innovative ways to pull this piece together, and it does make a huge difference. I also want to thank Minnesota Housing and Commissioner Mary Tingerthal, who have been really exceptional partners to work with, and have been very accommodating in every sense of the word. Thank you, hopefully, for the anticipated support on this item, and thank you all, committee members, for your work. I look forward to working with staff and property owners and council to reviewing the results of this initial pilot program, and hopefully we can improve it even more next year. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Councilmember Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, just have a couple comments. First, just want to commend Councilmember Goodman for really pushing this along and really stressing the urgency. This is a needed program. I'm really happy to see how quickly everyone has been able to move. Also want to really commend the department for all your work and just the approach, working with community groups, advocates, and landlords to come up with a pilot that would really test our assumptions and get something out there really, really quickly. And also just I had one comment of, as we're looking at NOAA housing, like there's nothing natural about naturally occurring affordable housing. There are reasons that these buildings cannot get market rents. And so while in the pilot, I'm hopeful we'll get those 300 filled up, but I would also like us to really look at the criteria of are we looking at how close they are to transit to these other amenities that would make them more desirable properties? And can we make sure that the best properties is where we're devoting our resources to? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say so clearly how much I think this is a critical part of our affordable housing strategy in the city. And I mean, we have something like 20,000 units in the city that are available right now in the market at around 60% AMI or lower. And my opinion is that we should be doing literally everything we can to preserve them, that's by far the best use of our resources right now. I've been talking with colleagues from around the country who are, 10 or even 20 years kind of beyond where we are in their housing markets. And if they could go back in time and preserve the affordable units in their market, they would do that. And, when I ask them any advice they have for a city like ours, that's what they say to do as a very clear highest priority. And that's not to minimize the value of us, building new affordable housing units and the other, and, the approaches that we're taking to finance the purchase of NOAA buildings. But I think adding this in as another tool right now in a time, again, where I feel it's so critical that we're being as aggressive as possible to preserve affordable units. There's a lot of potential in this strategy. I know when I learned about this, I mean, there's so many apartment buildings in the 10th ward that I think would both qualify for this program and who would be interested in this kind of program. And I would wholeheartedly support expanding it in the future. So I'm excited to see how this phase goes. I think this is a great approach this year. And then looking forward, I'm really just excited about the possibilities.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I did have one little question. I noticed that ours is set for buildings having at least 10 units. And is that just for the pilot program, or is that something that we think we're going to be continuing? Did we just come up with that ourselves?
Chair Gordon, that is not a statutory limitation. That is a limitation that staff developed in order to make it consistent with what we look at through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's certainly something that would be open for conversation in any sort of expansion of this program.
I appreciate that. And my understanding is if we're going to expand too, we're going to have to look at this again early fall in order to meet the timeline this time in the right way. So hopefully we'll do that, and hopefully we'll come back and realize that everybody, all the units we wanted to are joining into the pilot program. I also did want to say that I really appreciate the efforts to get sustainability involved in this and energy efficiency programs. I think this is something that's come up in the Clean Energy Partnership, and we actually raised our franchise fee so that we could help create programs just like this, I think, and bring this benefit. And I think that everybody who's involved in this recognizes that a lot of the smaller apartment buildings are those that could really benefit from these efficiency improvements. And actually then lower the cost of the people who live there and probably raise the property value in some way, the investment anyway, protect that for a longer term. So I'm hoping that that part of the program will catch on. I appreciate that some people have fear whenever they see a requirement and some kind of audit that's coming in, but hopefully we can make this offering and this gift of an energy audit to these property owners something they'll take advantage of, they'll appreciate, and then they'll realize they can get connected to actually these free improvements, maybe a furnace, hot water heaters, insulation, windows, things that could really improve the buildings. So I just wanted to pitch that a little bit while we had everybody's attention here. And hopefully that's something people will ask about as they get more involved in the program and see the benefits. So with that, then, I think we can vote on this. All right, all those that are in favor of passage of this resolution and authorizing our Affordable 4D pilot initiative, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. That motion carries, and I see no further business before us today, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.